Well, we had that shocker with the red wall in December 2019 general election, of course, and with the Hartley-Brewer by-election earlier this year. Well, now it's the blue wall that's looking pretty shaky after the Liberal Democrats won a parliamentary seat in Chesham and Amersham in a by-election yesterday, overturning the true blue seat there previously held by Conservative Dame Cheryl Gillan. A majority of more than 16,000 for the Tories has now become a majority of 8,000 for the Lib Dems. So what happened and why did Sarah Green manage that victory? Well, let's talk to the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And a very good morning for you and your party. I have to say, not many of us in the media were paying much attention to this by-election. We're all looking at Batley and Spen, a Labour seat. Could the Tories take that? Whereas, of course, this seat, it's a true blue seat. It'll stay true blue. Lib Dems thought differently.
Well, we didn't underestimate the scale of the challenge at any point. We knew we had an absolute mountain to climb, but we absolutely worked our socks off. And Sarah Green is our candidate and the new MP for Chesham and Amersham, and built a very strong reputation very quickly as somebody who was listening. And that really resonated with voters who had felt for a long time as though the Conservatives were taking their votes for granted.
Well, the Lib Dems have long had a very good by-election game plan, haven't you? You're very good at throwing the entire party absolutely sort of turns up en masse and focuses. We spoke to Sir Desmond Swayne, a Tory MP who was campaigning there in the last week, and he said, barely even saw a Tory poster. This was all about the Lib Dems. You threw the kitchen sink and more at it. What were the key issues, though? I mean, I'd like to think this was a vote against lockdowns. I'm hopeful in that sort of way. Lib Dems, of course, having abstained in that vote on extending lockdown earlier this week. But it was really more about what some people are just calling NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. Didn't like HS2, didn't like planning reforms.
Do you know what? There was a really a long list, probably as long as my arm, of the reasons why people didn't want to vote Conservative anymore. And there was a number of really good reasons why they positively wanted to vote Lib Dem. So some people felt as though they hadn't been consulted at all on HS2 and their voices weren't being heard. Some people didn't like the fact that these new planning laws the Conservatives are proposing are going to just chuck out community-led housing plans and just allow a developer free-for-all. Some people didn't like the way that PPE contracts have been handed out by ministers to their mates. Some talked about the way that COVID had ripped through care homes. Others are part of the 3 million excluded workers who haven't received a penny from the government for the last year. There was just a whole host of reasons why some people didn't want to vote Conservative, but there were lots of really strong reasons why they wanted to vote Lib Dem. Many of them realised they shared our values. And as I say, Sarah Green, who's now the new MP for Chesham and Amersham, built a very strong and quick reputation as someone who was listening, who was there on the doorsteps, talking to residents, listening to their concerns. And she has promised, I'm sure she will follow through on this, to be an independently minded MP that will give Chesham and Amersham the voice that it really deserves.
Well, certainly does seem to be quite independent of national Liberal Democrat policy, because the Liberal Democrats nationally are very supportive of HS2. Locally, though, the campaign was against HS2. All things to all men.
No, I mean, let's not forget the HS2 is a Conservative government project. Our national party policy is to support it. But Sarah Green has been absolutely clear that had she have had a vote, she would have voted against it. And now what she's going to do is fight for residents who feel as though information isn't being disclosed to them. There is disruption without them being informed. There are huge concerns about the impact on biodiversity that hadn't previously been revealed. And Sarah will speak up for local residents and their concerns over the way that HS2 is being implemented in that area.
But again, this is the same as the NIMBYism issue. So everyone says, we need to build more houses. We're going to build some more houses at the end of your road. Oh, no, not the end of my road, at the end of someone else's road. Oh, we need a new train line. Oh, but not running through our constituency. I mean, realistically, is this a sustainable policy?
Well, I mean, let's be clear, we're not anti-housing at all. We never have been. We had it in our manifesto at the last general election that we wanted to build more houses because we recognise there's a housing crisis. Well, this is the point. Under Liberal Democrat plans, we've always said that local communities should have a say on this.
But when local communities have a say, they vote for there not to be any more housing.
No, they don't, because under our proposals, you would have community-led plans for housing development, and the Conservative government's planning laws rip away any say for local communities to have a say on where housing and other development should be built, and they just allow a developer free-for-all. So it should be community-led plans for a development in everyone's areas, and that's precisely what we've been speaking up for.
Okay. In terms of where this takes us. I mean, again, Hartlepool was the real shock for the Tory party. Was not just winning Red Wall seats in 2019. I mean, the Liberal Democrats had a terrible night, as did Labour. But a real shock result there. Very unusual for a government that's been in office for so long. This they will be able to write off as a bad night result, local issues, midterm, middle of a pandemic, economic doldrums, and this is just a protest vote. We'll win the seat back at the next general election. How do you rate their chances?
Well, I think what's interesting this morning is that Conservative MPs who have been doing the media round appear not to know the answers as to why they've lost Chesham and Amersham. And I can tell you that we've got a pretty good idea as to why we've won it, because we've been out there speaking to voters and listening to people. And so I think there probably is going to be a lot of soul searching in the Conservative Party. Up and down the country, there are many places where the Liberal Democrats are the only party that can beat the Conservatives. And we intend to fight very hard over the next couple of years to raise our profile, to hold the government to account, to be the opposition that this country deserves, and to make sure we win as many seats as possible at the next opportunity.
Indeed, I mean, it's nice to have a bit of opposition from outside the Tory backbenches to some of the measures. A lot of your MPs didn't vote, did they not, for the extension of lockdown?
Yes, well, we're in a catch-22, aren't we? Because on the one hand, it's the government's own failure to get a grip on our borders that has allowed this new Delta variant to just absolutely run rife through our country. And as a result, it would be reckless not to delay the easing of restrictions. And so we're in a really difficult position here where, we wanted there to be the easing of restrictions, but given the way in which the Delta variant has just been left to run rampant as a result of Boris Johnson's
run rampant. We've got about 11,000 new cases a day, and we've got an average of under 10 people dying a day of COVID. Is that running rampant? On that basis, we're going to be back in lockdown with Lib Dem votes supporting that in the winter, aren't we?
No, what we've always called for is decisive action from this government, and that's precisely what's been missing. So the Delta variant is running rampant throughout the country, and that's why I think it's right that the delay of the easing of restrictions has happened. But the other problem is that the government hasn't offered any support to all those businesses that are going to suffer as a result. Yes. So what we wanted to see was, for all those businesses that have had to suffer further restrictions now, that have been banking on the fact they were going to be able to reopen on the 21st, they've had that delay, and the government as yet hasn't coughed up any extra support, which they need to do urgently.
If you consider where we are right now with this virus and these case numbers and death numbers and hospitalisation numbers as running rampant, 100% then you will be supporting lockdowns in the autumn and winter when these case numbers go up again, as they will. Is that right?
No, that's not what we're saying at all.
Why not? Why will you not support it in the autumn?
We will follow the science and we will follow the data. Now, what we're following at the moment, what we're seeing is there has been an increase in this variant. But when there are vaccinations and sufficient number of people are vaccinated, we think and we hope, because there are initial signs, that it breaks the link between the number of cases and hospitalisation and death.
We don't think or we hope. We know. We knew that before Monday.
So as the vaccination programme continues to get rolled out, as and when it is safe to have that easing of restrictions, that's what we want. We want to see that. And actually, you know what? We now have 3 national lockdowns. And after the first national lockdown, the government said that we wouldn't have to have another one because it would be the test, trace and isolate system would prevent the need for having another lockdown. And look where we are. Because of the government's failure to get that system right, we've now had 3 national lockdowns, and that's on the Conservative government.
OK, just finally, I want to ask you, front page of the Times today, UEFA basically saying they want thousands of VIPs, officials, sponsors, hangers-on to be allowed to come into the country to watch the final of the Euros at Wembley in a full capacity crowd. They want them to be able to come without having to go through the self-isolation rules for 10 days, as they're largely coming from Amber or other countries. Do you think they should be allowed in? And if they're not, we're going to see the final taken away from Wembley and given to Budapest in Hungary. Do you think the government should give in to UEFA or not?
So I haven't seen all the details about what's being proposed on this particular issue. What I would say is that the British public have made enormous sacrifices now for more than a year. And if there's anything that's going to put our gains at risk, we must be really, really cautious. So I would urge the government to look very carefully at what's being suggested, who might be allowed into the country, where they've come from, what the rates are in that area, and not to put the sacrifices that the British public have made at risk.
But you would accept in principle that there could be different rules because they're very rich sponsors or officials with UEFA, and that a football match would matter enough I love my football. I can't wait to watch the final. But you'd still think that would justify people not having to obey the same rules that my listeners and I would, and you would all have to obey.
I think it would be a very, very risky move at this stage, and it does sort of smack of double standards. So what we need to see is the data and the science and the details of what's being proposed here, and to make sure that whatever is decided doesn't undermine the sacrifices that we've made.
Why can you not just say, if the rules are there to save lives, the rules have to be stuck to, there shouldn't be any exceptions, we should all be facing the same rules? Why can't you just say that? Why is there this attitude within all politicians that some people are more important than other people?
Do you know what? I absolutely hate that attitude, and I don't think at all.
But then you were just saying you would justify it. You could understand it.
No, what I was saying was we need to look at the details, and I don't have all of the details of what's being suggested, what kind of how big this event is going to be.
No, they're either subject to the rules the rest of us are subject to, or they're not. End of story. It's an either or. Whatever the other extra conditions there are will still not be available to the majority of us who want to travel, whether for business or for pleasure, or to see family.
I would like to see the government be absolutely uniform on this, to put public health first and make sure that whatever is decided, if there are alternatives to quarantine, if there's a sort of test and release system that can work as an alternative that public health directors are comfortable with, then there might be a way of doing it.
Daisy, but not one that's available to the rest of us plebs.
Well, as I say, we've got a balance to make between the economy and public health, and I think the British public have always put public health first, and I would like to see public health put first as well.
One rule for them, one rule for the rest of us, and even the Lib Dems would sign up to that. It's just shocking what's happened to our country and our politicians. I really am so disappointed in so many of you, with all due respect, that you think this is acceptable. I do not understand how you can possibly think that would be acceptable. But there we are. Most politicians seem to. There we are. Daisy Cooper, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, thank you very much. Congratulations on that great by-election victory at 9:35. I'm just going to bang my head on the desk for a little bit while you listen to the news. This is Talk Radio.